the betrayal that sparked a fire. For over 2 decades, Claire Bennett had dedicated her life to building Bennett Holdings alongside her father. While other people in their 20s were backpacking through Europe or getting married, Claire was in boardrooms, crunching numbers, balancing risk portfolios, and saving her father's company from the brink more times than anyone would care to admit. She didn't just work at Bennett Holdings. She lived it, breathed it. She missed birthdays, anniversaries, and every summer vacation to ensure the business didn't collapse under outdated strategies and high-stakes gambles. And yet, none of it mattered. One phone call changed everything. Her father's voice had the tone of someone delivering news he believed was reasonable, maybe even wise. "Claire," he said calmly, "I've decided. Everything is going to Jason. You're out." It felt like someone had pulled the air from her lungs. Jason, the same brother who blew through trust funds partying in Miami and buying vintage cars he couldn't pronounce. The man who hadn't worked a full 40-hour week in his life was now being handed the very empire she built. Claire didn't scream. She didn't beg. She didn't even argue. That wasn't her style. She had been raised on discipline, grit, and the belief that hard work always spoke louder than tantrums. But sitting in her office, surrounded by framed awards, glowing client testimonials, and reports she personally authored, it hit her. Her father hadn't chosen the better leader. He'd chosen control. Loyalty, competence, and sacrifice meant nothing if you weren't his preferred child. That realization didn't break her. It hardened her. Claire had never relied on luck or legacy. She built her career with spreadsheets, strategic foresight, and the kind of work ethic only found in people with something to prove. Her father may have controlled the boardroom, but he underestimated just how much of that empire had been crafted by her hands. So when the betrayal came, Claire didn't wallow. She planned. She went home that night and pulled out a black leather notebook she had kept for years. Not company records, but her records. Every major contract she had secured, every internal weakness she had flagged, and every blind spot Jason wouldn't even think to check. This wasn't about revenge. Not yet. This was about reclaiming her power. She made one call, just one, to Henry Lawson, her father's oldest business partner. The man who helped fund Bennett Holdings when it was just an idea scribbled on a cocktail napkin in a Houston bar. He was seasoned, sharp, and most importantly, he had always seen what her father refused to admit. Claire was the future of the company. They met that night. In a quiet private club, under dim lighting and thick cigar smoke, Henry didn't even need convincing. "Claire," he said after hearing everything, "your father always said you had my ruthlessness. Let's see if he was right." And that was the moment it all shifted. No more fighting for a seat at someone else's table. Claire was going to build her own. Rebuilding from the ashes. The next morning, Claire didn't head to Bennett Holdings. She didn't punch a clock or smile politely in boardroom meetings where her voice was no longer welcome. Instead, she sat in a sunlit booth at her favorite coffee shop, the kind of place with cracked leather seats, handwritten menus, and coffee strong enough to make Wall Street deals happen. Across the table sat Henry Lawson, nursing a black coffee the way only an old-school businessman could. No cream, no sugar, just bitter truth. Spread out in front of them was the blueprint for something better. A new company, lean, sharp, and strategic. Not weighed down by ego or legacy, but driven by clarity, talent, and the kind of experience no Ivy League MBA could teach. "I'm calling it Everlight Strategies," Claire said, tapping her pen against a hand-drawn org chart. "Because that's what we're going to be, the ones out front, the ones who see what's coming before anyone else does." Henry gave a small smile. "Fitting. You've always been 5 steps ahead." And she had, which is why she didn't waste time chasing titles or trying to patch a sinking ship. Bennett Holdings had become a bloated machine. run by men who valued appearances over performance. But Claire? She had something they didn't, the loyalty of the people who had actually built the foundation. By the end of that week, she'd made 3 calls. Not pitches, invitations. Quiet, direct, and honest. The first went to Evelyn Moore, the head of risk management and Claire's longtime mentor. "I'm building something new," Claire said simply, "and I want you on the ground floor." There was no hesitation. "Tell me where to sign." Then came Maya, the analyst who could pull patterns from data like a magician, and Jake, the financial wizard who once saved Bennett from a cash flow crisis with nothing but a spreadsheet and 3 hours of sleep. Each one said the same thing. "We've been waiting for this." They weren't just jumping ship. They were coming home to a vision that actually valued their work. Every night for the next month, Claire's home office glowed until 2 a.m. She mapped out workflows, drafted investor briefs, built out legal structures, all with the meticulous hand of someone who wasn't just launching a startup, but rewriting the rules. And while Bennett Holdings fumbled through Jason's chaotic leadership, botching deals, hemorrhaging talent, and losing trust, Claire built in silence. There were no press releases, no announcements, just one calculated move after another. Henry pulled in investors, quiet capital from people who knew that real opportunity often comes in the shadow of collapse. And Claire? She recruited with precision. She didn't chase titles. She called the ones who mattered, the project managers, logistics experts, compliance officers, the real heart of Bennett Holdings. The calls were always the same. "You built that company. You deserved better. I'm building what comes next. Are you in?" And one by one, they said yes. By month's end, Claire had an office lease, a core team of 10, and a working prototype of the tech that had once made Bennett Holdings a powerhouse. Only this version was sleeker, smarter, and entirely hers. Everlight Strategies wasn't just a company. It was a statement. She didn't need her father's approval. She didn't need the family name. She had the people, the product, and the power. They had underestimated her. Now they were about to watch her rise. The beginning of the end. It started with whispers. Claire didn't even have to lean in to hear them. They traveled across downtown Austin like wildfire. Bennett's bleeding money. That Harlan deal fell through. Jason's in over his head. She didn't gloat. She didn't post cryptic tweets or take veiled shots in business journals. She didn't have to. The walls were closing in on her father's empire, and everyone in the industry could feel it. The Harlan tech deal had been their last major shot at reclaiming stability. A mid-sized logistics firm with scalable infrastructure and a $30 million valuation. It was the acquisition Claire herself had once initiated. But Jason had stepped in, overpromised, underdelivered, and ultimately scared them off. Harlan Tech didn't just walk away, they sprinted straight into the arms of Everlight Strategies. Claire personally closed that deal. Now her firm wasn't just operational, it was expanding, fast. By the end of the quarter, Everlight had secured 3 contracts from former Bennett clients, including a regional grocery chain that had once been one of her father's most prized accounts. Word on the street was that the client left after Jason failed to deliver on a logistics guarantee, a promise he never fully understood in the first place. Meanwhile, inside Bennett Holdings, things were unraveling. Senior executives were handing in resignations weekly. HR was scrambling to fill roles. And their financials, a disaster. Suppliers were demanding advance payments. Vendors were increasing rates, and investors were whispering about pulling out. It wasn't just business, it was trust. And Jason had shattered it. Claire watched it all unfold like a chess master, 5 moves ahead. She had known this would happen. Bennett Holdings was never built to withstand a leader who couldn't lead. Legacy might open doors, but it couldn't deliver quarterly returns. She spent her days working, building, fine-tuning, but at night she'd get messages from old contacts. "Is it true you're running a new shop? We'd love to talk if you're growing. We're thinking about leaving Bennett." The people had spoken, and they wanted in. By mid-spring, Everlight Strategies had doubled in size. The office she'd leased downtown had expanded into the suite next door. Desks filled with people she trusted, people who respected her. The kind who stayed late not out of obligation, but out of shared vision. Evelyn Moore, now COO, led operations like a general at war, measured, relentless, and 3 steps ahead. Maya was delivering real-time analytics that helped clients cut shipping costs by nearly 18% in the first month. And Jake? He'd already restructured their financing strategy to accommodate projected growth through quarter 4. Everlight wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. And still, Claire said nothing publicly. No interviews, no spotlights. Let the numbers speak. Behind closed doors, she prepared her next move, a bid on a government contract that Bennett had once held exclusively for over a decade. She didn't expect to win it immediately, but she expected to scare them. Across town, the Bennett boardroom was a war zone. A leaked financial report revealed that quarterly revenue had dropped 32% compared to the previous year. Investors were demanding Jason step down. Staff morale had bottomed out. Robert Bennett, once the titan of the industry, was now a man watching his legacy go up in smoke. And the worst part, he had no one to blame but himself. Claire didn't cheer. She didn't raise a glass. But the morning the Austin Business Journal ran the headline, "Bennett Holdings on the Brink." Former Air, now Industries rising star, she did clip it and she framed it. Not for pride, not for spite, but as a reminder that empires built on ego always crumble, and empires built on truth, they rise. The final play. The room was silent except for the steady hum of the HVAC unit overhead. Claire sat at the head of Everlight Strategies' glass conference table, fingers laced under her chin, eyes locked on the digital screen in front of her. Across from her sat Jake, Evelyn, and Maya, her war council. "This is it," Jake said, sliding a contract folder across the table. "The Federal Logistics Infrastructure deal, Department of Transportation, 5-year scope, $120 million. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "That's the one Robert always bragged about. Bennett held that account since before Jason could spell supply chain." Claire nodded slowly. "Until now." It wasn't just about the money. Sure, a $120 million deal would double Everlight's valuation overnight. But this was legacy. Symbolic. Personal. Her father had won that contract 15 years ago with grit, polish, and a vision he used to share with her at 3 a.m. over stale black coffee in the corner of their original warehouse. Now, she was taking it from him. The opportunity came after weeks of quiet back-channeling. Rumor had it that Bennett Holdings had defaulted on a timeline with the DOT, missed a key milestone, failed to deliver critical inventory tracking upgrades, and left a regional port hub scrambling for 3 weeks. Government agencies don't like excuses. They like results. And Claire had built a company designed to deliver exactly that. "We have a final meeting with DOT Thursday," Maya said, tapping her iPad. "They've seen our platform. They're impressed. But we need to be airtight. They're still wary of new vendors." Claire leaned back, considering. "They want proof?" She stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Austin. "Then we give them certainty." The next 48 hours became a full-scale sprint. Evelyn rewrote the proposal to highlight their automation's integration and error reduction analytics. Jake restructured the pricing to outcompete without underselling. And Maya pulled real-time data from 5 existing clients to show Everlight's on-time delivery rate, 98.7% across 3 states. But Claire's move was bolder. She picked up the phone and called a retired DOT executive, a man her father used to play golf with on weekends. He had always liked her, said she had steel in her spine and Wall Street between her ears. She invited him for lunch, no pitch, just 1 hour to catch up. By dessert, he was already texting his former team, "If you want this contract done right, take a long look at Everlight. Trust me." When Thursday came, Claire walked into the federal procurement office dressed in a charcoal gray blazer, navy blouse, and 3-inch heels. She didn't come to impress. She came to own the room. Their presentation ran 28 minutes. Every question had a metric. Every concern had a case study. When the final slide read, "Everlight built to deliver," Claire looked around the room and saw something she hadn't seen in years. Not curiosity, not hesitation. Respect. As they exited, one of the assistant directors quietly pulled her aside. "I remember when your father walked into this building years ago," he said, offering a knowing smile. "But you built this on your own." 3 days later, the call came. They won the contract. The $120 million deal was theirs. Everlight was now officially the government's primary logistics vendor for the Southern Corridor. Claire sat at her desk, holding the signed agreement in her hands, heart beating slow and steady. Across town, the news hit Bennett Holdings like a freight train. A flagship contract. Gone. Investors pulled back. The board called an emergency session. And Jason? He reportedly locked himself in his office and refused to come out. Claire didn't need headlines. She didn't need a press release. She just needed one thing. A framed copy of that contract, placed quietly on her wall beneath the headline, "Everlight secures $120 million government deal." Because while her father built an empire, she had built a legacy, and it was only just beginning. The tables have turned. The knock came at 9 a.m. sharp. Claire was sipping her second cup of black coffee, skimming through Everlight's latest hiring proposals, when her assistant, Melissa, appeared at the door looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Miss Bennett," she said slowly, "your father and brother are here." Claire didn't look up right away. She let the words hang in the air, absorbing them like a slow drip of déjà vu. "Send them in," she said, setting her mug down with surgical precision. The office fell into silence as Robert and Jason Bennett walked in. Robert, once the lion of the boardroom, looked like a man unshaved by time and regret. His charcoal gray suit was impeccable, but the stoop in his shoulders gave him away. Jason, in contrast, wore the same designer bravado he always had, but his eyes were hollow, jaw tight. The smirk was gone. They sat when she motioned to the leather chairs across from her desk. No handshakes, no pleasantries, just the weight of silence and what they had come to ask. Robert cleared his throat. "Claire," he began, voice hoarse, "we need to talk." "About the government contract?" she asked casually, leaning back in her chair. Jason shifted uncomfortably. "That deal was supposed to be ours." "It was," Claire said, "until it wasn't." Robert interjected quickly. "Look, we've made mistakes. I've made mistakes. You were always more capable than I gave you credit for." Claire raised an eyebrow. "That's quite the understatement, Dad." He flinched at the word. "We didn't come here to argue," Jason added. "We came to offer an alliance. We believe that with your leadership—" "No," Claire said flatly. Robert blinked. "Excuse me?" "No," she repeated. "I won't rescue you. I won't fix what you broke. And I sure as hell won't come running back to the company that discarded me like a tempire." Jason leaned forward, desperation creeping into his voice. "We're hemorrhaging clients. The board wants change. They'll listen to you now." You mean now that the ship's halfway underwater and you've realized you never learned how to swim? Claire's voice remained calm, even. We're still family, Robert said softly. Claire stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the Austin skyline. You know, for most of my life, I would have done anything to hear you say that. I would have traded every late night, every 70-hour work week, just to feel seen. She turned back to face them. But now, I don't need it. Robert opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. I'm not bitter, Claire added. I'm just done. You'd let your own family fall? Jason snapped, his voice rising for the first time. Claire walked back to her desk, picked up a file, and handed it across the table. Already has, she said. Inside the file was a public notice. Bennett Holdings files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Robert's hands trembled as he read it. Jason just stared at the page, mouth open, speechless. We're finished, Robert whispered. Claire gave a small nod. No, Dad, you are. For a brief second, she saw something flicker in his expression. Not pride, not anger, just loss. She didn't gloat, she didn't throw salt. She simply stood tall and said, I built something on my own. And this time, no one's taking it from me. They left without another word. When the door clicked shut, Melissa peeked in. Everything okay? Claire smiled faintly. Better than okay, because the girl they once overlooked had become the woman they had no choice but to face. And this time, she wasn't waiting for their approval. She was living her own legacy. The signature that buried their legacy. 3 weeks after Robert and Jason walked into Claire's office asking for help, Bennett Holdings was officially declared insolvent. The headlines splashed across every major business outlet. Bennett Empire crumbles after years of mismanagement. Once a powerhouse, now a pawn in the acquisition game. But behind the scenes, Claire wasn't watching from the sidelines. She was playing the long game. The bankruptcy court opened bidding on the company's remaining assets, from its downtown Austin headquarters to patents, trademarks, and yes, even the family name itself. It was a fire sale, and the vultures were circling. But Claire? She wasn't just a bidder, she was the one writing the rules now. In a quiet conference room at the top of Lyra Ventures' sleek tower, she sat across from a panel of court-appointed trustees. The final offer was printed, itemized, and awaiting one signature. The assets of Bennett Holdings, everything Robert had built and Jason had squandered, could be hers. She stared at the final line. The pen felt heavier than usual. You sure about this? Her attorney, Miles, asked from across the table. Claire didn't hesitate. Absolutely. She signed, fluid and deliberate. And just like that, she now owned Bennett Holdings. Every asset, every patent, every brand mark, every last piece of paper her father once swore she'd never touch again. But she didn't stop there. 1 week later, a press release hit the wire. Lyra Ventures acquires and retires Bennett Holdings. Legacy ends, future begins. There would be no resurrection, no rebranding, no second chance for a family name that had once stood for dominance in Texas commerce. Claire wasn't interested in carrying on her father's legacy. She was interested in burying it. She didn't send out press kits or throw champagne parties. Her move was quiet, precise, and devastating. By sunup, all former Bennett properties were being rebranded or sold. The headquarters, sold to a nonprofit for workforce development. The logo, scrubbed from digital databases. And the name, permanently retired, legally sealed. For the first time in decades, there was no Bennett Holdings, only Lyra. Claire stood in the very boardroom where her father once told her she wasn't leadership material. The marble conference table was still there, but the family portraits were gone. In their place hung a single-framed quote, "Power isn't inherited, it's built." Her staff moved around her, prepping for the next acquisition. But Claire took a moment to reflect. She didn't do this for revenge, though the poetic justice wasn't lost on her. She did this because some legacies don't deserve to continue, because daughters like her deserved more than a seat at the table. They deserved to build their own. Later that afternoon, an envelope arrived. No return address. Inside, a short note in familiar handwriting. Claire, I made mistakes. I see that now. I hope someday you'll understand why I did what I did. Dad. She stared at the letter for a moment, then she fed it into the shredder, the buzz of the blades slicing away the last thread of guilt. Because it wasn't her job to understand anymore. She had already outgrown the world that tried to hold her back. Bennett Holdings was gone. Lyra was thriving, with $480 million in active contracts and a 52% market share across the southwestern United States. But Claire's real victory wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in freedom, in legacy, in the knowledge that she didn't just reclaim her place. She built something no one could ever take away, and this time, her name was the only one on the door. A stage, a spotlight, and one last goodbye. 2 months after dissolving Bennett Holdings, Claire Bennett stood beneath the crystal chandeliers of the Texas Leadership Forum, an annual gala held in downtown Austin honoring pioneers across business, tech, and community innovation. It was the kind of event her father once ruled, the kind where Jason used to swagger through the ballroom, all charm and tailored suits. But this year, the spotlight wasn't on the Bennetts, it was on her. Claire Bennett, founder and CEO of Lyra Ventures, the host announced, has transformed the face of modern logistics and acquisitions across the Southwest. Tonight, we recognize her not just for her business acumen, but for her resilience, leadership, and unwavering vision. As she approached the podium, dressed in a sleek navy dress that radiated understated confidence, the applause grew louder. But it wasn't the sound that struck her. It was the faces in the crowd, board members who once dismissed her, executives who once underestimated her, and competitors who now studied her every move. She took a deep breath and leaned into the microphone. Just a year ago, she began, I was told I didn't have what it takes to lead. That technical skill wasn't enough. That presence mattered more than perseverance. Tonight, I want to thank the people who said those things, not because they were right, but because they pushed me to prove just how wrong they were. A few quiet chuckles rippled through the room. I stand here not because of legacy or luck, but because of work. Because of the nights I spent at a folding desk next to the copy machine, building a vision in silence. Because when the doors closed on me, I learned how to build my own. She paused, letting the words settle. And to every woman in this room who's ever been told to sit down, to wait your turn, or to be grateful for the scraps you're given, I say this: you don't have to inherit power. You can build it, you can take it, and you can do it with grace, with grit, and on your own terms. The standing ovation was instant. Later that night, as the music played and glasses clinked in celebration, Claire slipped out to the balcony, overlooking the Austin skyline she now helped shape. The air was cool, the lights below glittering like her future, bright, vast, and entirely her own. She wasn't seeking applause anymore. She wasn't chasing her father's approval or Jason's respect. She had become something bigger than a name, bigger than a company. She had become a symbol, not just of revenge, but of reinvention. And as the wind gently moved through her hair, Claire smiled to herself, not because she'd burned the empire that betrayed her, but because she'd built something no fire could touch. Her story wasn't one of bitterness, it was one of becoming, and it was far from over. Claire Bennett's story delivers a powerful lesson on self-worth, resilience, and the importance of building something that truly belongs to you. For many professionals in their 40s and 50s, this narrative resonates deeply, especially those who have sacrificed for companies, families, or causes that ultimately failed to value them. Claire didn't crumble under betrayal. She took the heartbreak and rejection and turned it into fuel. Not for vengeance, but for vision. The key takeaway here is that legacy isn't something handed down, it's something forged. Whether in business or life, waiting for someone else's validation can leave you stuck in a story that was never truly yours. Claire reminds us that sometimes the only way forward is to let go of the people and systems that refuse to recognize your worth, and then build your own table, your own future, and your own rules. This isn't just a story of business triumph. It's a call to action, to believe in your own voice, to honor the work you've done, and to stop asking for permission from people who benefit from your silence. Power isn't inherited, it's built, one brave decision at a time.